Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Gordon Frayne. We are back with another video. Today we are comparing Solana versus Ethereum. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of each, compare and contrast, and see what's been happening. As always, if you enjoy the content, please make sure to subscribe, smash that thumbs up button, hit that bell notification icon, and don't forget to grab your completely free copy of The Rise of Bitcoin linked below the video in the description. Grab it now and let's talk about Solana versus Ethereum. So I'm just going to do a quick update with regards to the price of each of these individual assets. We can see that Solana currently sitting just under 150 US dollars per token. We have broken out of this downtrend that we've been in since the middle of January highs for Solana, and we have moved from lows around $95, $96 where we bounced up to about $150 over the course of the past 2 to 3 weeks. Ethereum currently sitting at just over $1,800. We've also seen Ethereum break out of this more local downtrend here on the 22nd of April. We've moved a little bit higher, and as you can see, we're currently sitting at just above $1,800. Okay, the real chart that I want to look at here to get the full picture of what's happening is Solana versus Ethereum. And zooming out on this particular chart, let's look at the weekly here very quickly just for a moment. It paints a pretty stark picture with the reality of what's been happening here over the course of the past few years. Really, since we had these lows back in the summer of 2023, we have seen significant outperformance of Solana versus Ethereum. This is a Sol ETH chart, meaning that Solana is the base asset, Ethereum is the quote asset, and the chart moving up and to the right in this direction is illustrating the outperformance that Solana has had compared to Ethereum. If we measure that on a percentage basis, again, it's a pretty sobering chart to look at, but since those middle of summer 2023 lows, all the way up to where we are today, we can see that Solana has outperformed Ethereum by 1,200% in the past 679 days. Okay, again, that is a pretty phenomenal outperformance over a 2 to 3 year period, and it just shows how much growth we're seeing with Solana's ecosystem and how much dominance it has gained over Ethereum during the past couple of years. Okay, we can't deny the outperformance on the chart here in terms of price, but price isn't everything. And we need to compare and contrast what's been happening across other metrics, like what's happening in DeFi, what's happening from an on-chain standpoint. So I want to jump over and I want to look at DeFi Llama very, very quickly, because when we look over here at the chain compare area, it's pretty clear that Ethereum is still the leader when it comes to the amount of total value locked in all of decentralized finance. So we're currently sitting with total DeFi numbers, I think, let's go back to the overview here very quickly, around 100 billion US dollars, and Ethereum is making up more than 51.4% of all TVL in DeFi. So the entire birth of DeFi was really thanks to Ethereum, and we can see that Ethereum has maintained the vast majority of the entire market share from a DeFi TVL perspective over the past number of years. Now, we have seen this number declining because if we zoom back 12 months prior to today, Ethereum's market share in DeFi TVL was a little bit closer to 60%. And if we zoom back 12 months prior from today as well, Solana, its market share of the TVL in DeFi was sitting closer to 2%. So Solana has been gaining and moved from 2% up to 8% of total value locked in DeFi, while Ethereum has moved from 60% down to 51, 52%, where we're sitting at today. Okay, so Solana is making moves to the upside in terms of gaining market share over Ethereum, but clearly the network effects that Ethereum has established in terms of decentralized finance TVL are still huge compared to what Solana is doing. It's making up 6x the TVL that Solana is, and it still has a huge dominance when it comes to everything happening in DeFi. Okay, will we see those numbers change over the coming year or years? Yes, absolutely. Will Solana continue to make up more market share? That remains to be seen, but moving from, quadrupling in terms of its percentage market share in the course of a year while Ethereum is moving to the downside, it definitely bodes well for the trend that Solana could well continue to eat into Ethereum's market share of total TVL in DeFi. Okay, the other big metric I'm looking at is chain compare from a daily active addresses and daily transaction standpoint. What we're looking at here is the Artemis terminal. We're looking at daily active addresses for the past 3 months or the past 90 days. And what you'll notice here from an on-chain perspective is very interesting because Solana is blowing everything else out of the water when it comes to the sheer amount of daily active addresses and daily transactions happening on-chain. We know the big problem with Ethereum is the fact that it is not scalable and not cost-effective to operate on. The gas fees for executing transactions, swaps, and trades on Ethereum mainnet are simply too high to attract huge amounts of retail investors into the network and execute trades and swaps in a very consistent manner. And Solana challenged Ethereum a number of years ago, particularly in the last cycle, not just from a DeFi perspective, but simply from an on-chain standpoint. Solana is much more cost efficient and a higher throughput, more scalable blockchain to handle more transactions in a more cost-effective manner. And the amount of users and daily active addresses that Solana has compared to Ethereum clearly illustrates the preference of users and retail users when it comes to choosing blockchains to operate on. Okay, you can see that we're consistently getting 5.2 million Solana daily active addresses, and you have to go all the way down the list here to the very bottom to see Ethereum is getting somewhere in the region of 3 to 500,000 daily active addresses. So Solana is technically doing more than 10x Ethereum from an on-chain daily active addresses standpoint. Of course, we know there are other layer 2 scaling solutions for Ethereum, just like Base, which is illustrated on this chart as well. Base is doing in excess of 700,000 to 1 million daily active addresses as well. So all of those, you could argue, somewhat count towards Ethereum's market share in a broader sense. But from a strict layer 1 blockchain standpoint, Solana is blowing Ethereum out of the water when it comes to the amount of daily active addresses and the amount of daily transactions happening on chain. Okay, the big use case I'm thinking that could make more sense for Ethereum, at least in the medium term, is when it comes to real world asset tokenization. What we're seeing here over the course of the past couple of years is a huge increase in the amount of real world assets being tokenized on chain. We're talking about things like stablecoins, US treasuries, global bonds, private credit and equities, etc. And when you look at total real world asset value, we can see that a large amount of that is private credit and US treasury debt. And we're seeing things like commodities, public equity, institutional alternative funds all coming online and all coming on chain. But if we jump over into let's see here, if we scroll down actually to the RWA League table, you can clearly see that Ethereum is the leading network when it comes to real world asset tokenization. And my suspicion here, again, this is just my opinion, not financial advice, is that Ethereum may well become the choice for institutional investors and money funds in order for them to execute real-world asset tokenization in an on-chain manner. While Ethereum, of course, is very expensive from a gas fee perspective, it is still much more cost-effective than the current legacy systems many of these institutions are using, and it could well pose the biggest use case for Ethereum in the coming years. If I jump over to US Treasuries just as a very quick example, we can see how different institutions like the BlackRock Middle Fund here have been increasing the amount of tokenization on chain over the past couple of years. We're seeing exponential growth with regards to real world asset tokenization happening on chain. And you can see again, market cap breakdown by network, Ethereum making up almost 3/4 of everything happening here from an on-chain tokenization standpoint. Okay, so while it is expensive for individual users and retail investors, it's still much more cost effective for these institutions to use blockchain solutions like Ethereum for tokenizing real world assets compared to those legacy systems they're using. Okay, I think this could be the use case for Ethereum in the coming years. It may well lose, or you could argue is already losing when it comes to retail investors choosing more cost-effective and scalable blockchains, because who wants to be paying $5 or $10 for gas when you can pay 5 cents for that over on something like Solana? Okay, just my 2 cents here. The other quick charts I wanted to look at was very quickly compare Ethereum with Bitcoin and Solana with Bitcoin. So if we bring up the ETH to Bitcoin chart, interestingly here on the weekly, we've been moving down and to the right in this chart with ETH versus BTC. We know this essentially means that Ethereum has been significantly underperforming against Bitcoin for the past number of years, since these September 2022 highs and even November 2021 highs. We've been moving down and to the right, okay? We've come all the way down. Look at this support level. This support level goes all the way back to November Q4 of 2019. We haven't been this low since that time period, and it's looking like we might have come all the way down here to retest this support. And hopefully, for those of you who are bullish on Ethereum, we might be seeing that bottom in for ETH versus BTC, and hopefully ETH can begin to move to the upside against Bitcoin over the coming months. Okay, if we compare that to the Sol BTC chart, again, Bitcoin technically has been outperforming Solana for the past couple of months, but it does look like we have a bottom in here as well. On the whole, if we look at the bigger picture, comparing that same time period for Ethereum versus Bitcoin and Solana versus Bitcoin, you can see that we have had a pretty big move to the upside here, especially since these lows at the middle of 2023. You can see that we moved very sharply to the upside, with Solana outperforming Bitcoin significantly during this 12 to 18 month period. And then once we got into the January 2025 highs for Solana, with this big spike up with the Trump token hype, you can see that Bitcoin, as it was pulling back, did actually outperform Solana for a 2 to 3 month period. Okay, again, if we're looking and we zoom in on the daily here very quickly, it is also looking like we might have found a bottom here by the time we had those lows on April 7th, 2025. What we're now seeing is Solana moving to the upside against Bitcoin, starting to outperform it over the past 2 to 3 weeks. Again, we don't know if this bottom is officially in, but it is boding well for Solana to keep moving to the upside against Bitcoin. I'd like to see it try reclaim the 200-day simple moving average, and maybe we will see Solana outperforming Bitcoin for the rest of 2025. So again, I wanted to try give a full rounded picture here, guys, of Solana versus Ethereum. I think they both have different pros and cons, but I do think Solana has the potential to continue outperforming Ethereum over the coming months. And again, looking back to this chart, you could argue that it needs to regress to the mean or come back to retest the 200-day simple moving average, where Ethereum might outperform Solana for a period of a few weeks until we get a bounce again. I do think that chart keeps moving a little bit further up and to the right to follow this very steady uptrend that we've been in since the end of 2023. Again, until I see a breakdown in this chart or in this trend line, I'm still relatively bullish on Solana compared to Ethereum. So I hope that makes sense. So that's it for today's video, guys. Again, if you want to learn more about how you can provide liquidity in decentralized finance, you can check out the link for the UIG in the description below this video. Again, I'm helping so many clients take back financial control when it comes to decentralized finance, providing liquidity, generating consistent yield and cash flow every day, every week. You can do this too in the world of DeFi with both Ethereum and Solana. So many options across different decentralized exchanges and decentralized protocols. Check out the link for the UIG below if you want to learn more about that. And we're also sponsored by Femex, the most efficient crypto trading and investment platform. I'm also going to leave a link for Femex in the description below this video. Again, this is not financial advice, guys. Always do your own research when it comes to any asset in the crypto space. If you got any value at all out of today's video, I would love if you dropped a thumbs up on the video before you run out the door. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification icon. And again, you've got a completely free copy of The Rise of Bitcoin waiting for you below this video in the description. Grab it now, and we'll catch you in the next one.